Disclaimer: the information contained in this production should not be used as a substitute for the advice of an appropriately qualified and licensed professional. The information provided is for informational and entertainment purposes only.
Welcome back to the next episode of Ask Sue and Kate, where, hi, I'm Kate.
And I'm Sue.
And we're here to answer some questions today. Actually, I think both of us were kind of blown away with how well received this has been so far.
Oh, yes. I mean, it's just very gratifying that so many of you watched and commented. So very appreciative and happy that it was workable and helpful.
I agree. And relieved is a word that I think we both felt
Yeah,
because we were nervous because this is something that I think both of us have a great passion for, and we want to do this channel justice. So we're very grateful that it was well received, and we even got some questions that were written into us. And although there were, I believe, 8 questions so far, and I don't think we're going to be able to cover them all in this episode, but I do want to get to all of them. So make sure that you're subscribed. We are planning to answer the remaining questions in the following week's episode. And I have an exciting announcement. We are on Spotify. So if you want to listen to this in a podcast form, there is a link in the description below for the Spotify. And also, my mother actually had a great idea to add some resources in the description link below. Did you want to talk about those a little bit?
I do. I think it's really important when we're talking anything about mental health, about relationships, that you have some places that you can go for professional help at that moment. So yes, we have added some resources that may be helpful as you listen to our comments, and so hopefully that you will use those, look at them and see what's there, and then hopefully take advantage of them.
Perfect. I think we are ready now to get into some of these questions, and we're going to start with the first one, which has to do with friendship. I'm going to go ahead and read these questions aloud, and then my mom, I think she should start the conversation, and of course I will come in as needed, but she's the expert. So here is the first question. I have a friend of over 20 years. I feel she was not supportive during my mom's 4-year battle with cancer of the jaw. The last 6 months were a bit tough as the cancer came back, and I was taking her to radiation therapy every day, working, doctor's appointments, taking care of household and husband. My mom passed away Labor Day weekend after her long battle. She died at home under hospice care. My friend works at my office for 3 years. One day I snapped at her for something she wasn't doing correctly. I know I could have handled it better, so the next day I apologized to her and told her I was very sorry. I was just under a lot of stress and tired taking care of my mom, as she would wake up in the middle of the night, and I would need to help her to the bathroom at this point. She was using a walker and not steady on her feet. Her friend's response was, "We all have things going on in our lives." So after this, my mom passed a month later. She never acknowledged her death, no card, no hug, no calls. It broke my heart. The kicker was I was always there for her and her family. Her mom and dad were in an accident. I called every day to see how her parents were feeling, brought them food several times. There were so many times I have been there for her in the past 20 years. Am I wrong for feeling heartbroken? Thank you, Kate and Sue, heartbroken friend.
First, I want to say I'm so sorry for your loss.
Me too.
Losing a mom and watching it is so terribly, terribly sad and grievous. Secondly, I want to say thank you for being such a great friend to your friend. You obviously, that's who you are. You took care of your mom. I bet you this friend isn't the only person who you treat with kindness and care. And that those are traits that you possess that are wonderful and special, and not everybody has those traits. When we do something for someone, generally we do it because we want to, because it's out of the goodness of our heart. And when somebody doesn't help us back at the same or even a similar level, which it sounds like this person couldn't even rise to a similar level, hurts our feelings. That to think that they don't care as much as we did, and I think a way to to reframe that is that your friend does not have that trait, does not have the same ability to put themselves in another person's shoes, perhaps doesn't have the emotional strength that you have to carry a load. And so her remark to you that everybody has trouble is true. Everybody has trouble, and everybody faces their troubles in different ways with different kinds of strengths. So what I would say is, I hope that you're able to leave this as a past thing that happened. You have enough going on with losing your mother and being a mom and being a wife and being employed. That's a lot already. And to carry somebody else's something that they didn't do for you is too much. So I really encourage you to reframe that and say, now you know more about her. People, when somebody tells you who they are, believe them. So good on you for being you, and good on you for thinking about being willing to let this go.
Yeah. And that's something that you just said at the end of when somebody tells you or shows you who they are, believe them.
Yes.
That is a quote that I have been raised hearing my whole life, and I will tell you that has served me so well. That is something that I think so many people need to hear, and this is exactly why I wanted to start this channel, because you have so much wisdom and so many people don't get to hear these things, and when you do grow up hearing them, it gives you some armor to shield yourself or protect yourself or just know more. And I think, like you said, believe who your friend is telling you who they are. It doesn't make that person bad.
No,
it just, like you said, maybe they don't know how to handle it. Maybe that was something that for her was too much and she just didn't even know what to say. I know there's so many times where a friend or a loved one has lost somebody and it's so hard to say anything at all. And I know that you're not even supposed to really say much, right? You just sorry for your loss. And even that sometimes can be triggering for people. So I don't know, I'm playing devil's advocate, but maybe her friend just didn't know at that moment how to handle it. But I would have my feelings hurt too. If I'm putting myself in the person that asked this question, like I definitely would feel sad and down if my friend didn't reciprocate the same type of support that I gave them. So I understand that those feelings are hurt. Would you recommend her talking to her about this, like bringing it up in a very casual way?
Well, my first question about that would be, what good would that do?
Yeah.
Because I think sometimes we try to solve a problem that's ours, and we end up making it worse because it's not a problem for the other person. They're going, what are you talking about? Of course I was there for you. Because in their world, they did what they could. And so I wouldn't say don't address it. I would just say be really aware of what you want the outcome. Mm-hmm. Anything you do, be aware of what your expectation, we were talking about this earlier, expectation.
Yeah.
Be aware of what your expectation is, because you may not get it, and then you're disappointed twice. So I would certainly not out of hand discount having that conversation. I would just make sure I knew what I wanted out of it before I started it, and then decide if I could get that.
Yeah.
Or if I'm going to make it worse, if I'm going to ruin the friendship, if there's one left. Again, I think there's so many things that we do that are not, there's not a right and a wrong to these things. There's not a do or a don't to these things. There's an assessment process that sometimes I think we get spontaneous, and that spontaneity is so fun, and sometimes it's so rewarding, but other times it really gets us in a pickle.
Yeah. Well, I just think for her, she mentioned, there's two things that she mentioned that I am not quite clear on. One is that she said she had this friend in the office for 3 years, but then later on she said she was friends with this person for 20 years. So that's two different scenarios in my head, because a friendship with 20 years, I feel like you could, depending on the type of friendship. For me personally, my best friend, we've been best friends for almost 30 years. And I feel like if we ever had a situation, which we have actually had situations where we haven't talked or she's hurt my feelings and vice versa, And sometimes it takes us a long time to come together and actually talk about it. But I just couldn't imagine a world with a friend, having a friend for that long and having something that's really hurting my feelings and not actually going to her and talking to her. But I know her in a way that she would be very apologetic, and she would feel so awful that I was made to feel in a bad way, then she would have no idea. And so that's why I think if this is a friend that just missed the mark and had no idea that she did something to offend you, or she didn't know how to handle it, and you approach her later and you have the friendship where you can be honest and say, hey, look, that did hurt my feelings. I still want to continue the friendship, but I just want you to know that that's something where I wanted support and I didn't feel like you were there for me in that time. So I just, it does depend on the friendship.
Absolutely. And it depends on how you frame it.
Yeah.
Because if how you said that was really good. If you would go to her and say, why didn't you support me? A good rule of thumb is anytime you ask a why question, WHY question, it's judgmental. You're telling them that they've done something wrong from the get-go. And that's always true. Sometimes we have to use the word why. But in a situation like this, I think why didn't you support me also already sets up sort of a combative tone. So the way you said it would not have done that. It would have been more, that famous use I statements kind of
you
thing.
Explain how you feel rather than
than what
you
they did
made me
you made
feel
me
this
feel.
way. But you could say, like, I felt hurt, and I know maybe your intention wasn't to do that.
Yes.
I'm sure it wasn't. If they're friends, obviously, I don't think most friendships, true friendships, a friend would do something to intentionally hurt you.
Right.
But I also think that statement that she did say about, everyone's going through things, that kind of alluded to me that she's dealing with something that she's maybe not telling her friend and saying,
and that could be.
I don't have the mental wherewithal right now to take on anything else that's not what's going on in my family.
Right.
And that's also hard, but sometimes there's people that sometimes give everything of themselves and they leave nothing in the tank for themselves because everybody needs something and they're doing everything for everyone else, and then they have a total mental breakdown. And then there's other people that are like, I can't deal with anything.
Yeah.
And I feel like we've all kind of done both in our lives, where we felt like, oh my gosh, there's too much, I can't take on anymore. And then there's also times where you just don't feel like taking on anymore, and you don't.
Yeah. Well, and I think something you said too early on was that we all deal with things differently. Sometimes there are people who have suffered a loss, and the way they grieve is, I'll use me, the way I lost my brother and my nephew inside of a month. And my brother was very ill, and was not unexpected that he passed. But my nephew died in a motorcycle accident just a month after my brother. And I had, people were just like, oh, how can you stand this? How can you do this? I'm a really good compartmentalizer. I said, well, my brother died because he had cancer and he was very ill, and it's tragic that my nephew died, and we have things to do. I have nieces who need to be taken care of and held and comforted. Sorry, I don't get to fall apart. It's not mine to do that. So I think it's important to respect how other people grieve, how they handle stress and anxiety, and it's not always easy to understand what's going on with somebody else, and so we get our feelings hurt. Understandable, completely understandable.
I agree, and I think that's a good spot to wrap up this one. But I do want to thank this person for writing in. Thank you for being brave and eloquently writing in and asking for help. I feel like that was a great question, and we're going to continue on with the next one.
Can I add something to that too?
Of course.
What I want to say is that because you're not sitting in the room with us, that we sort of talk around it a little bit. So for the person, thank you so much for writing in. Take what applies to you, and leave the rest of it because we talked around it because you weren't sitting in the room with us.
Yeah, that is a good point. And we are kind of talking more in general terms because we have a wide audience and everybody might be going through something similar but not exact. So thank you for making that point. Question number 2. I have a 21-year-old daughter. She is a great person. She just graduated college, summa cum laude, and has a job and apartment that she pays for. We have never had a very close relationship. She does not like when I give her advice, and of course, that is my job, so I always have given it to her. My mom and I are super close, and it's really hard on me that my daughter doesn't feel the same way about me as I feel about my mom. A quick example is a friend of mine is going over spring break to stay in her daughter's dorm with her for the week and just hang out. When my daughter was in college, I asked her if I could do something like that with her. She had her own apartment and didn't share it with a roommate. She did not want me to do that at all. That is just one example, but I really don't know how to get closer to her. She is closer with my husband, her dad. They always joke around, and he's always kind of been the good cop. I thought it would change when she got out of college and was an adult, and I know it's only been a few months, but it definitely has not gotten better. Any advice would be greatly appreciated. I really don't know how to handle this because I've always looked up to my mom and taken her advice, or at least listened to it. All right.
Okay, so again, I'm not in the room with you. I don't know sort of what some of the
Dynamics are.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The dynamics are. What I will say, however, is that as a mom, Kate and I are close. We weren't always close. And maybe because of what I do and what I did before kids were born, that I was a therapist, is that advice is a tough one. I think we can give suggestions, we can give thoughts, we can give perspective. Advice can sound like you're telling them what to do. I will tell you, there is no kid on this earth, or adult on this earth, that wants to be told what to do. So I would say, and I don't know that that's the situation. I'm not saying that's what you are doing. I wonder, though, if perhaps some of the advice that you gave was some way felt stifling to your daughter, and that perhaps that is what's getting in the way of your relationship a little bit. And so I would just ask you to think about, how is it that how do you approach your advice? What kinds of advice are you giving her, or have you given her in the past? And then maybe give it a rest for a little bit. If your relationship is there, she will come to you. You know, what is that thing they say that kids don't really like you till they're in their 20s? And I mean, in 21, it's, you know.
Well, they like you when they're young, and then they stop liking you, and then they come back.
Yeah. So I would say, kind of think about what kinds of conversations you're having with her. Sorry, I'm stumbling over this. What kinds of conversations you're having with her, how you're approaching them, and then let her take the lead sometimes in your conversation. What's going on with you, and just listen.
Yeah. Well, something that I will say, another one of your great quotes, something that you've said forever, just like when somebody shows you who they are, trust them. You've always said, don't give advice. My mom's always told me this, because my friends, I'm always the one that I feel like my friends can come to and talk to, because I do listen and I enjoy helping my friends if they need help. But I used to always frame it like that too. Well, I need to get my friend's advice, or I need help with this. And I always call my mom because she knows so much. And you always say, what do you say about advice?
So advice, when you give advice, if they take it and it works, they won't take the credit for it because it was somebody else's idea. If it didn't work, they blame you. So advice is dangerous. Either whether it works or doesn't work, it's dangerous. And it can be dangerous.
Yeah, and even you as a therapist, she always says that she doesn't ever give her clients advice. It's kind of helping someone direct them in traffic. You're going to say, hey, I will be your map quest today, and I'm going to show you the roads, but you've got to get there yourself, right?
That's a really good way to look at it.
So I think I noticed that too in that situation where she said she always listened to her mom. Maybe doesn't always take her mom's advice, but listens to it. Right. And I think you've said maybe her mom framed it differently, or maybe she just has a different personality and is able to accept what she thought of as her mom's advice. And she thought, hey, I look up to my mom. I know she knows better. And also times have changed, you know,
Absolutely.
because
I was just thinking about that generationally.
and like that's something that even my mom and I talked about being on this podcast and doing this, is that we have two different generations between us, and we have different perspectives because the way you grew up and how your household was so different than the way I grew up and the way my household was. And I think also, just kind of tacking on to this, I'm adding a lot, but having a 21-year-old daughter is so different than having a 30-year-old daughter, or even a 25-year-old daughter. Honestly, 21 is such a pivotal age, because now if you live in America, legal age of drinking is 21. You kind of find yourself a little more independent at that age. And I feel like sometimes you do kind of keep pushing boundaries and getting your parents away because you want to create that independence. You want to feel like you're on your own and you're grown up now, even though when I think back to 21, I'm like, geez, I was still a baby. I didn't know anything, but I know that feeling of just wanting to like, oh, I don't have my parents to tell me what to do. I can stay up till 1 a.m. and I can go out to the bars and I can just, and maybe she's not like that. Obviously, she's a good kid, and not to say you're not a good kid if you drink, but I think that maybe she is asserting a little bit of independence and boundaries. Maybe. Who knows? But I think you're spot on as far as like maybe the advice is driving her away a little bit. Instead of making her come back.
And I want to say, too, this cracks me up because you say she likes her dad better. Dad. Because good cop, bad cop, her dad wasn't a cop. I mean, Dad, I want to go shopping. And he'd go, come on, let's go.
Yeah.
And they'd come home and it's like those two would sneak out of the house to go shopping. And so no wonder she liked her dad better than me sometimes, because dad, or differently, not better.
Yeah,
differently.
that's true.
And so I'm not going to say,
it's not this.
let's not give a value to it like that. We served different purposes.
Yeah.
And sometimes, I think both those things are important. I think both the two parents, whether it's two women and two men, or a man and a woman, or whatever, I think it's okay to have a little bit of a different relationship with each of them. And that your daughter has a great relationship with her dad is amazing. That's a wonderful thing. And how lucky she is to have a dad that she aligns with. So I would also look at that and be grateful that she has that relationship, and then just kind of hold on to your bootstraps. It'll be okay.
I agree. And it's such a good point, because I definitely was growing up, I was kind of a tomboy for a little while. And then I was a girly girl. But my dad used to take us to the dump, or me specifically, and we would stop and get orange juice from this orange juice stand. And it was like my dad and I's weekly ritual. He'd go to the dump every weekend. And
he was a contractor. They weren't just going to the dump to hang out.
yeah. He'd be sweeping out, and I'd look at the seagulls and stuff. But a lot of those memories with my dad, and I would agree with you as far as like, I was closer to my dad for a long time in my younger years. And then it kind of flip-flopped, I think twice maybe. Like I was close to my dad, maybe younger. And then I don't remember exactly when, but I feel like I was a little closer to you, probably when I was going through puberty, and I just needed somebody to relate to. And, you know, you and I were fighting and stuff. So it was like, we
had something in common.
Yeah. Just pow, pow, pow. Not physical, obviously, or just verbally like argue and stuff. But, and then I went back closer to my dad, maybe in high school, or maybe a little bit after that. And then now I feel like as I'm older, I am more close to my mom, but I love my dad. My dad is awesome. He's here right now. He's in the front with my husband and son. So, but I'm lucky because both my parents, you guys are both amazing. And there's, like you said, there's no comparing. There's no like, I love you guys exactly equally, but feeling close and feeling like more in common. I feel like you and I at this stage in our life, we just have this, I don't know, like it's like we're almost the same person a little bit sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's, we have we think a lot alike. We have a lot of the similar perspectives, not the same, but similar perspectives.
Right.
So, yeah. And so for you, what I would say again is, good on you. You got a kid who graduated from college. She wanted her independence. She didn't want you to come stay in her apartment with her. When Kate lived in her apartment, she never invited me. So I would, take it with a grain of salt and let her grow up, and you will find your relationship.
Yeah, that's good. And you can tell that you're really proud of her. So I think just that in itself is so important for children to hear, because showing that you're proud of them, maybe not all at once, they might not be like, oh, thanks so much, or just like, stop telling me all the time. But secretly, and especially when you become a parent yourself, hearing those words are so important and so validating, and it teaches you to be internally proud of yourself. Because just hearing that somebody's proud of you is great, but to actually feel that pride within yourself is really the goal. That's what you want. And I think as her mother, I feel like you've done such a great job to even get her where she is. And she sounds like a very smart, independent woman. I think everything you've done you've done a great job. And I think, like you said, it might just come with age and time, and giving her a little bit of space and letting her, like you said, come to you is just, I think, is really good advice. And I think that's going to serve.
It's a good perspective.
Serve well.
It's not advice.
Oh, you're right. My bad. Full circle.
See, we're just demonstrating.
All right. Good catch, Mom. Okay. So are we feeling like
so.
This is
Yeah.
pretty well done? Okay. We're going to go into the third question in this video. Now, I did want to say we've been getting a lot of questions about parents and their children, and I love that. And I think that's actually very representative of what you're seeing here with my mom and I. So we appreciate these questions. Some of these might sound similar, but they're definitely not the same question. Just a lot of questions about parents and how to navigate their kids. So here's the next one. I was wondering if you have any tips on how my husband and I can talk to our 16-year-old son, who we suspect might have Asperger's syndrome, and we want to go get him tested for it. Our son had been doing really well through school until he reached high school, and now has been dealing with severe social awkwardness, anxiety, and depression, and has been getting psychological help for it. But now we're waiting to take the next step to go get him tested to see if he might indeed have Asperger's. We do not want him to feel like we think he is broken or less than. We want to approach this in a positive and uplifting way to give him tools for his life. Thank you in advance for any advice you might have to offer.
Congratulations for doing such a good job. I know I keep saying this to everybody, but I'm so impressed by people who love their children, and they take care of them, and they do the best they can for them. And so again, you have right along taken seriously that your son has some struggles maybe, and maybe some differences, and you have him in therapy, and you're already addressing so many things that I'm so pleased to hear that, because it's so much easier to start at this point for them to feel like this is a good option to get into counseling. It doesn't mean there's something wrong with me. It just means that maybe I can face life in a little bit different way. So starting off with that. And I also think that gives you a head start for the next step. You're helping him to seek help. And I'm wondering if the person who he's already seeing has thought about who to refer, if to neurology to have some of the testing done. So perhaps the person he's already seeing, that he has a relationship with, can help you take the next step for the testing. Because coming from you, he might feel, because you've already, taken it this far, he might feel okay with that, but maybe coming from a professional who would then frame it in a way that is not, we're going to go test you for Asperger's, which that's no longer even a diagnosis, it's a spectrum. On the spectrum, that it might be more palatable, and easier for him to feel like it's just the next step. You know, this is the next thing we do in therapy. Not all depression, anxiety, and social anxiety is autism, but it certainly could be. And it would be great to identify it so you can get some specialized help with that. So my best thought around this is to loop in the counselor, and if it's a school counselor or if it's a psychotherapist or a psychiatrist, whoever he's seeing, loop them in and have them advocate with you for him.
So if I'm understanding, I'm just going to get clarity for myself, is what you're suggesting to have the person that's helping him with, like you said, counseling or whatever help he's getting from his psychologist, have them broach the subject, like have them say, hey, we actually think we're going to do some further testing, and don't necessarily have the parents bring it up in the first place. And maybe then after that session, the parents can then talk to him and say, what do you think about that? Or like, how would that look?
Okay, yeah, that's a really good clarification question. So if this were me doing the work, I would have a conversation between me and my client first and say, you know, it looks like, maybe there's something else going on here that we might want to investigate a little bit, maybe something that is driving these symptoms that you have. And so I'm wondering if you would consent to having a little bit more testing, more specific testing. And then I would, once he said, well, yeah, that'd be okay, I guess.
So so the parents bring it up to him first?
No, I'm talking the therapist would do this.
Oh, okay.
So,
I'm sorry. I lost what you were
no.
saying.
So it's during a therapy session.
Okay, got it.
The therapist brings this up in a way that is just sort of a natural conversation.
Right.
If then and this is a leap, but if then the person, and often they do actually, because you have a relationship with them, says, yeah, we could do that, then you bring the parents in.
Okay.
And because it's a minor.
Right.
He's a minor.
Underage,
so you bring the parents in and say, Jacob and I have been talking about this, and what we're thinking is maybe next steps is to do a little bit other testing outside of me or in conjunction with me. How would you feel about that? Asking the parents.
Got it.
So the parents
in front of him. So
yes,
he
in front of
sees
him.
That the parents are not getting looped in without
Exactly.
necessarily having the parents be the driving force to the whole thing.
And I think
a really smart way to do it.
That would, because it takes the onus off the parents. Because not that there's anything wrong with parents suggesting that. I'm not saying that, but sometimes,
it's the way the kids perceive
it's how the kid feels,
Yeah, because
and that's what I'm thinking.
I agree. I think that's so smart. And being a teenager, I can hardly remember being 16, but I know that it's tough. It's a tough age. And boys, I'm not there yet with my son. My son's 7, but you've had a son that's been 16, and you know that is a very, depending on the child, it is a very tiptoe time where you don't want to overstep and make them. I always remember you telling me, like, I don't want to push you guys away. Like, if I do something too much or I'm too, one way or the other, it might push you away. And this is like a pivotal time in your age where you want their independence, but you also don't want to push them away.
Because I wanted, I'll personalize this, I wanted our kids to feel like that they could come to us and we weren't going to throw them out of the house, or we weren't going to put them on restriction for the rest of their lives, or we weren't going to send them to the camp in Utah. Or I just wanted them to feel like the first time Kate drank, she called me.
I was 20.
Mom,
I was like 3 months away from my 21st birthday, and I felt so bad about it.
And so, that's the kind of, it's not permissive. I should have looked up her name. There's a woman who did this great research on parenting, and there's these different types of parenting. There's permissive, and there's authoritative and authoritarian, and these types of parenting that I wish I would have looked up her name. It's Diana somebody, I think. But there's some really great perspective in that about how to approach your as your children grow at different stages. And so I always thought that authoritative was really important, where we were still the boss, but we didn't have to be right all the time. We were still the boss, but we gave them the reins of their lives as long as they weren't being a danger to themselves or others. And so I think that the kind of idea I'm talking about.
But not
for dealing with
friends.
this.
Not friends. That's something you'd always say is, I'm your parent, I'm not your friend.
Yes, absolutely.
And even to this day, she says that. Like,
Yes.
we are not friends. Although, I feel like now that I'm older, you don't have to parent me as much.
Well, I don't parent you, but I am your parent.
I know.
And
but we have so much in common.
I know,
We
and I
seem
love
like we're
you.
friends.
We have a lot in common with friendship. If something were to happen and you needed your mom,
Yeah,
I need to be your mom.
I know. I get that.
Yeah, and so you'll see.
I know. But I do wanted to make that a point, is that you definitely were a parent with boundaries. Like, I feel like I turned out to be a good person, and I never got in trouble. I was always like a very, I hate getting in trouble. That's like one of my worst fears ever. But you definitely didn't you didn't hold us back so much where we're like sneaking around and having to like do things that, behind your back, because like you said, you do want to have your kid be able to call you if she always would say, if something happened to you somewhere, like if I was in LA or something and I got into a situation where I couldn't get home or I was scared or whatever, she always said, call me. I don't care if it's 3 a.m. I don't care where you are. I will never scream at you if you are seriously in trouble or you're hurt. Like, I will come get you. It doesn't matter. And that has been something that I've grown up with, and that's how I'm raising my son too. I don't want him to be fearful of me.
Yeah.
And I think that's such a smart approach, because when you are fearful of your parents because they're the authority figure, and you're so fearful that if you're in trouble and you have nobody else to call, but you'd rather just be in the trouble you're in, than call your parent, and then it's too late, bad things can happen. And you want your children to come to you to feel safe and secure and protected, and not be the one that you shouldn't have your parent be the one you're afraid of.
Ideally, absolutely not. I mean, being respectful, as we talked about last time, being respectful is really important, and being respected is equally important. And so I think that's where that is that their boundaries are really important. And you start that from the time they're little. You don't expect an infant to follow anybody's boundaries. Heaven knows one doesn't sleep for a long time. But as you get a little bit older, there are things that are right and there are things that are wrong, and it's important as a parent to help them to learn that. Because if you let them do anything they want when they're 4, how are you going to stop them when they're 14? And so I think this is a progressive thing, and to go back to the parent with the question, I think you've already done that. You've instilled this. You've already started that, and now you're just at this step, sort of trying to bring it back around to the question.
No, I know. I wanted to bring it back too, so I'm glad you did. I also wanted to say it's a smart thing to be thinking about, especially at his age right now. It's kind of like you're at the cusp of him being old enough to go and do these things for himself, if he will. And I think it's smart to do it now before he might not want your help later and might not think he needs it. So I don't know. I just feel like this age is like an important age, and it's nice that you are thinking more in depth for him and wanting to get him the additional help that he may need, and maybe not need either. Like you said, it might not necessarily be that.
May not.
But as a parent, I feel like we do have these hunches that a lot of times we know our children. So, but it is nice to know there is other options, and it might be something else.
I want to step away from this particular question for just a second and talk about what quarantine did for 2 years almost. Young folks, well, all of us, were kind of trapped in our homes and on TV screens or laptop screens. And so some of the milestones that would have happened for that group, and I think in particular, it's like first, second, third graders, and then middle schoolers who miss. These are important milestones that happen in those grades, and I think there's a lot of social. I worked at a college, as I said, and so much social anxiety, and that was before COVID. that when we left, I was seeing so many students with social anxiety disorder, and as we're looking at it and thinking about, where is this coming from? I hate to demonize cell phones, but I'm gonna because the face in the phone, the instant gratification, that everything happens in seconds has impacted how young folks view the world and how the kind of control they have over it. And I think COVID the quarantine complicated that. So if you have a youngster who does feel anxious a lot, as looking like having some depressive symptoms, pay attention to it, please, because those things are, I don't remember my kids' friends having social anxiety disorder, but we didn't have a name for it. I think we overlooked things for a long time. So just be aware that things are harder, things have gotten harder, that young people are facing things that I didn't have to face.
Yeah. Well, I think that's it for this week's episode. We kind of hit the end here, but wow, I just feel like we tackled 3 really big questions.
Yes.
And that was, it's nice. It's really nice to hear your perspective, because sometimes I think something in my mind and then I hear you speak and I'm like, oh, that's it. That's what I was trying to say. That's what I wanted to say. I first want to say it's so nice to have the audience be respectful in the comment section so far. So nice. Everyone has been very just positive, and like I said in the last video, that's kind of what we want to bring to this channel. We want positivity. We want people to feel free and open to speak their mind, and we want support. We don't want to see people putting each other down in the comments, because that does not help with mental health issues. And we're here trying to make a difference and make some change in this small little section of YouTube. So thank you guys. I want to give you credit for starting it off strong. Thank you for leaving comments. And again, thank you for writing in. If you have a question yourself, please feel free to write the question in the email that will be linked in the description below. Also, there will be resources down below, like my mom mentioned in the beginning, that if you need some further help and assistance, please click those links. And we are excited to continue this journey, and we will be, like I said, there's more questions that we want to answer that we didn't get to this week. So next week we're going to finish off the rest of the questions, and I will say one of these questions is a very, very heavy question, so I'm just going to give you a warning in this episode, and I'll warn you again in the next one. But it is a serious topic, and it's something that I want to make sure you're aware of. So if you are excited for that video, make sure to give this video a thumbs up. Let us know how much you've been liking it. And of course, subscribe. We are almost to 1,000 subscribers, and we so appreciate you guys and all that help and effort. So anything to add?
I would like to add, if it sounds like that we addressed a question either that you asked or that applies to you, we'd love to hear how that landed on you. If it feels like it was helpful, or if there was something that you would want to add to it that we missed because we missed it. So we're really interested in the follow-up. The reason we're doing it is just to put some information out there that's a little bit hard to come by in everybody's world. So thank you.
Yes, thank you. So we will see you guys again in next week's episode.
Okay.
Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.